Hello, I'm Jim Smith. I was born December 20th, 1946, Redding, California. I grew up in Redding and other towns in Northern California. Went to Humboldt State University. And between my junior and senior year is when I did join the Marine Corps. I joined the PLC program. A lot of influence obviously in my family. My dad and two of his brothers were Marines. One served with Chesty Puller in the Banana Wars. The other one, who has the same name I do, was killed at the start of World War II, and he's buried at Point Loma. And my dad was a platoon sergeant on Iwo Jima. That was his last of several campaigns, and he didn't walk off of that one. So anyway, had I joined any other branch of the service, I'd have probably been excommunicated from the family, and that would have been the end of that. So, but I did go to PLC in this class in the summer of 1967. It was a memorable training class. Not something I'd want to repeat again, but it was very memorable. Following that, I did graduate the following June from college. I have a degree in forestry, which is not related really to flying or what I ended up doing after I got out of the military, but anyway, it was a good background for math. I went to flight school. I was accepted into flight school in Pensacola. Reported down there, I believe it was August of 1968. Got my wings in August of '69. Went to Santa Ana, trained for 4 months in the 46, and then my initial orders to Westpac, I was initially assigned to 164, and for the most part of that time, 3 months there I was working off a carrier, and then I was reassigned in the summer of 1970 to HMM 364 at Marble Mountain, and that started what I would call a rather storied adventure of being, probably the greatest helicopter squadron in the Marine Corps. Okay, I arrived in Vietnam in August of 1970. I can't remember which day, but it was August. And I remember you reported into the group, and of course they needed 46 pilots, and they started asking where they want to go. And I'd kind of heard from a very close friend of mine, Pat Kinney, that 364 was a good unit. So I said, fine, I'll take the Purple Foxes. And so they assigned me to the Purple Foxes. I reported in down there, and as I ended up, I lived in the same Quonset hut that Pat did. Fortunately, we had a partition between us, but that was that's where I was. And there were several folks in there that we'd all gone through flight school together, and in the case of Pat, we actually were in OCS at the same time, flight school, so we did the whole thing. Started flying right away. In fact, I think some of my early on, I looked at my logbooks recently, some of my early on familiarization flights were actually with Pat. And then I flew with some of the other folks, and I actually ended up being an aircraft commander in about a month because I already had my hack papers when I came into country. So I think it was about a month I flew, and then I was flying missions myself as a aircraft commander. During that time also, I think we left and went to the Philippines for a week to JES school or survival school of some sort. And then came back, and all I remember from that point on, it was flying almost every day. I also worked as a flight operations duty officer, so we put together the flight schedules for everybody. So I guess you could say we had one day off because we were on for 24 hours as a flight duty officer. There was a lot of memorable missions, some good memories, some not so good memories. I was laughing here talking with Pat. In my logbook early on, there is an 8-hour mission. And if you break down the codes, it says a troop strike. Now I'm trying to figure out where on earth we could have gone for 8 hours on a troop strike unless we flew to Hanoi, and I don't think we did that. But anyway, it must have been a fun mission because on that one. And I also very vividly remember the first night medevac I flew. I'm not positive. I think I was flying as co-pilot. I think the hack was, I think it was Russ Laney if I remember. And that was a memorable mission. It was probably the worst one. We picked up a patrol that had walked through a minefield, and we came in, we didn't know we'd landed in it until we started picking them up, and that's the only time I ever looked back on a medevac, and I'd never do it again. And we needed a fire truck to clean the thing out when we got back. It was a bad mission, so we'll just let that one stay where it is. A lot of the other missions, I remember resupplies, recons were always fun. One of the funniest ones I got, it wasn't funny at the time, but it turned out to be funny. We flew this mission, and I don't recall the numbering, but we called it the Weirdo Mission. We'd sign things and pick up Green Berets and go do other things with them. And 70, Mission 70, that was it, the weirdo mission, Mission 70. And all I remember one day, I got the call because I was assigned that mission. You just kind of waited around, and that Green Beret base was just south of where we were at Marble. So they asked me to fly down there. They said it had a pallet of captured weapons or something. They said, just take them out over the ocean and drop them. I said, sure, that's not a problem. So I pick up this pallet, and it is extremely heavy. I mean, we get off the ground with it. So we get out over the ocean, and it was overcast, so I'm probably down at 700, 800 feet. We get over there, and crew chief says, okay, we're far enough out. Well, I pickled the load. What I determined later was, because the load exploded when it hit the water, that there were dud rounds and everything else, and those guys had wired that thing. So when it hit, it blew up. My helicopter went quite a ways up in the air from the updraft. The crew chief screaming because he got slammed around. You could feel this rush of hot air. And then I had the dang DAS on the phone ask me what the heck's going on out there. So it was kind of funny later because I think we killed a lot of fish was the net of that one. So that was one of the weirdo missions. There are other ones that were a little bit different, but that was kind of a strange one that they had us doing on that one. I try to think of some of the other ones that we had. I did have one, the first time I led a mission, it was either sectionally or divisionally, or I don't remember which, and it was a strike, a troop strike into the mountains. And so we started out, and it was a very steep approach. We were high up in the mountains, so we were all coming in real heavy. And we had gunships and the whole thing. Well, when they'd created this landing zone, I think they'd probably a daisy cutter or something, but anyway, they'd blown off a lot of stumps, and they were about 6 to 8 feet tall. So you had to come down, you had to miss those and get into the zone. So I did the first approach, that worked fine. We went back for the second trip, and this time out, I thought, well, the co-pilot needs some experience. So I asked him, I said, do you want to take this approach? He said, sure. So I said, all right, shoot it steep in case, you get low on power, and if you come up short, just listen to the crew chief, talk you in. Well, we came up short. He didn't listen to the crew chief. Anyway, the net of the story is he backed off the throttle and planted us on the top of those stumps with one of them up through the floorboards. So now I've got that. We're rocking on that. There's fuel because he cracked one of the fuel lines on a cross feed. The crew chief's going crazy, and he wouldn't let go of the controls. So now we have all the buzzers coming on because the RPMs are below 92, so everything's screaming in your head, and I'm looking down about a 300-foot drop-off on my side. So being the quick to react type, I undid my knee clipboard and hit him in the head as hard as I could. First time I ever struck a Marine officer. Anyway, he did let go, and after milking the controls, we got it off there, and you could hear it ripping the metal as we came off. We dropped it in the zone, got the troops out. I headed for Marble and called ahead and said, they had fire trucks out and everything, because I didn't know if I was going to make it, because I didn't know how much fuel I had, because the gauges weren't working. Landed, cleared the runway, jumped out, and since we still had the rest of the mission to run, they had another bird waiting, and I went in and jumped in that aircraft, went in the ready room, and took a whole bunch of grief from the rest of the pilots, just, general harassment. Got in the aircraft and flew another 5 hours, at which time the co-pilot did not touch anything for the next 5 hours. So he'll remain nameless to this day. But that was probably one of the more exciting, probably one of the most terrifying missions I ever had. Because I thought for sure we were going to go down. Because if I couldn't get the RPMs back up, we'd have never come off those. We couldn't get off the stumps. We wouldn't have made it. And the ground troops weren't real happy back there, rocking around at about 8 feet off the ground. So I can see Pat's laughing at this, wondering what I was up to. So that was an exciting mission. And there were other ones that, night medevacs were always exciting. No matter what you thought it was going to be, it was something different. And compared to pilots of today, we would have given anything for night vision and GPS to know where we were going. I remember another funny mission over there. Probably it wasn't funny at the time, but it's one of those later on you think is funny. And we were coming back from, I don't know if it was a strike or what it was, but it was during the monsoon, so it was bad weather, and I think the XO was leading. There were 4 of us, and I had the lead on the second section. And we're getting close to Marble, so he decides to call up, and we're going to do a division GCA approach. 4 of us coming down the glide slope, because we're in the clouds. We're going to come down, and so we're stacked, overlap rotor blades coming down, lining up right, and pretty soon my wingman, I'm not sure who it was, but called in very calmly, and he said, I don't mean to rush you, sir, but one of my generators is on fire. Could we kind of step this process up a bit? So Yes, we did. Down we came in a hurry through the clouds. We all made it. I guess you got to be young to do that stuff, because nowadays I think about it and there's no way I would even try some of this stuff that we did then. Well, my tour ended February of 1971, and it even ended on an eventful note. My last mission was originally supposed to head over the High Van and head for Quang Tri. No gun support. They thought it was an admin run. Well, I couldn't make that one because of weather, so I ended up hauling troops on basically a strike, although I didn't have any gunships, back up in the Charlie Ridge in that area. Came out of the first drop, came over the side of the hill and did the classic 46 zoom climb to get power, and lost an engine. And we got it flying about 10 feet off the ground. Buckland was a crew chief. Might remember somebody named Charlie Silvers was a co-pilot. Thank God, because we both knew what we were doing. So after a few obscenities, we got it flying. We made it back, burned up the other engine. I climbed out, as soon as we cleared the taxiway, turned all my flight gear in, immediately had a few drinks, and they came to me that night and said, "Can you fly some test flights?" To which I replied in a rather obscene term, "No." So the next day I left and went to Da Nang, stayed there for 3 days. Got out of country, back, the standard route was back through Okinawa, and I flew into, I think it was Norton Air Force Base, it was Southern California. And I landed at 2 in the morning, and it was the day that had one of these very large earthquakes that had, I don't know, damaged everything. So I couldn't figure out at 2 in the morning. I was trying to call my wife, who still lived in Tustin. Phone lines didn't work. I couldn't get through. And it took about 2 hours. Finally got a hold of her because she didn't know when I was coming in. We didn't stop in Alaska. We made it non-stop from Japan, so we didn't stop. So anyway, I got back there, and 2 weeks later we're moving cross country because I got reassigned to New River. Even though I asked for every duty station on the West Coast that you could think of. They lost my orders, and when I got them it said New River, so off we went. Checked in back there, and they said, "Well, would you like to go flying squadron?" I said, "Sure." They said, "Well, you're deploying to the Mid in 2 months." I said, "I don't think that would go over too well. What else do you have?" So I spent a year in a staff job with a HAMS outfit. And interestingly enough, my CO in that HAMS outfit was Charlie Cannon, who was under John Lavoie when they went in initially. It was 34 or so, and he was a tremendous CO. So you're in a staff job, very little flying. I was the S1, and then I managed to negotiate, and I won't bore you with the details, but I knew how to set up their drug policy programs that were a big thing in the Marine Corps then, and the Huey squadrons failed their IG on it, so I made a trade. I won't extend for any time, but if you want it set up right, bring me over. So I did. I went over as the S1 of HML 167 for my last year. I came up to get out. They offered me a regular commission. My wife strongly recommended that I might not want to take that at the time. So I came out of the service at that point, and I was ready to get out at that time. I mean, I think all of us we were tired. We'd been in combat, we'd been on, wherever you'd been in duty stations, you were just, you wanted to do something a little different. I liked the Marine Corps, I always have. 364. At the time, yes, it was a fantastic squadron, and it was for the reasons that there were people there that would put their life on the line for you, no question. And you really didn't think about that a lot, I don't think, till many years later. Because when I got out, IBM hired me to go to work for them, like they thought I knew something about computers. But anyway, went back to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I started what ended up being a 37-year career in computers and software. The last job, ultimately 13 years ago, got me to Reno, so that's where I've stayed ever since then. And I never talked much about Vietnam experiences. Kenny and I would connect once in a while, but other than that, there was nobody that I worked with that would have understood what I was talking about in the first place. So what really got me going on is somehow I read about this group starting up called Papa Smoke. And I went to the first reunion. It was like, I'm going to say 1990 maybe, 91. It was in Las Vegas, a very small group, but there were some of the Purple Fox people there. And I hadn't seen them. Dave Owens was one. I hadn't seen him for quite a few years. And so we got talking a little more about it. And then over time, of course, then the Purple Foxes got their own website and really got active in it. And the things. And I would try to explain to people, if you go to those, you really get a bigger appreciation for what they were. And I try to explain to people that camaraderie, and it's real hard to explain if you haven't been there, because you just, you know, nobody understands what it means when you're willing to die for the guy next to you. They don't. So it was a great experience, and I had some people tell me at Compaq Computers, I worked there a long time, and had some pretty stressful jobs. And I remember when this one woman that's a very good friend told me one day, she says, you came into this meeting and customer stuff was going crazy and all this stuff, and all you looked around and says was, well, nobody's shooting at us, can't be that bad. These people didn't know what to do. You know, like I said, as you get older, you think about a lot of these things and how it's affected you, and or has it affected you? And yes, it has. You can't go through something like that without having some effect, positive or negative, on you. I'm fortunate. I don't think I had post-traumatic stress syndrome or anything like that. I think we all get a few nightmares now and then. That just kind of goes with the territory. I asked my dad one time, since he was a long time, you know, Marine and a lot of combat, I said, "Do they ever go away?" And he said, "No." Well, you're a lot of help. So, but the other thing I think it helped me a lot in my business career was the discipline that you learned from the Marine Corps, the responsibilities they gave you, and that was really, I think, exemplified with 364 in Vietnam. I mean, as a lieutenant, if you were a division leader or a flight leader, that's exactly what you led missions. They didn't care if you were 23 years old or what. It said, here, you can do this, then you did it. Private industry doesn't give you that much responsibility at that young an age, and they did. And sometimes you'd make mistakes. Hopefully you never made the same one twice, okay? But I also met a lot of very good people out of that time frame, which over the years now we've got a pretty good organization going that we get to see a lot of them. And we've all gone our different routes. Some have stayed in the military, some have gotten out. One made general. Maybe two of them, I can't remember. There was one, at least out of our squadron, that made general on that. We had some good COs, not so good, but one of the things that I think came out of all this was, and I've talked to pilots that were in other squadrons, and 364, I don't know what you would call it, but they had I guess the integrity, they had the drive, and they had this can-do attitude that I never saw our squadron turn down a mission for anything. And there were some times, and some of them that I were on, that you wondered why you were doing it, but we would never turn down, and especially if it was a grunt on the ground or a wounded personnel, you did not turn those missions down. And we never did. And we probably took more casualties and hits than most squadrons, but we kind of figured that's our job. And that's the one thing that sticks with me as to why that squadron was so great. And I think if you look at some of the careers that people have had that have come out of there, we've got federal judges, we've got state Supreme Court justices, a 3-star general, doctors, lawyers. We've got some pretty phenomenal folks that came out of that. And I attribute a lot of my successes to what I learned from that tour with 364.